After we bought a house, my husband's parents showed up with their bags and said, "We'll be moving in, it's your job to take care of us now." My husband shrugged. "Their family, we have to." I smirked and said, "Good thing I took precautions." Their smiles disappeared when they read the house deed and saw the new living arrangements I had made. Buying this house was supposed to be a dream come true. It was my first real taste of financial independence. I had worked my ass off for years, saving every penny, sacrificing nights out, skipping vacations, and taking every extra shift I could get. When my husband, Michael, and I finally signed the papers, I felt like all that hard work had paid off. A 3-bedroom house in a good neighborhood in Austin, Texas. A nice backyard, plenty of space for our future kids. It was perfect. I should have known it wouldn't last. Because less than 24 hours after we moved in, his parents showed up at our doorstep. Not for a visit. Not to congratulate us. They had 2 massive suitcases each, smug smiles on their faces, and an attitude that immediately set off alarm bells in my head. Barbara, my mother-in-law, stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. "Ah, finally," she sighed, stretching like she owned the place. "This is going to be just perfect." Carl, my father-in-law, nodded approvingly as he glanced around the living room. "We'll take the biggest guest room," he announced as if that was already decided. I frowned. "What?" Michael, standing beside me, shifted awkwardly. Barbara turned to me, all fake sweetness. "Oh, honey, we just can't waste money on rent anymore. It doesn't make sense when you two have this big house all to yourselves. It's only right we move in. Your family, after all." I stared. I turned to Michael, waiting for him to shut this down. Instead, he shrugged. "Their family," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "We have to." "No. No, we do not." And that's when I smirked and said, "Good thing I took precautions." Barbara's smile faltered. "What do you mean?" I walked over to the kitchen counter, picked up a folder, and pulled out the house deed. Then, I placed it right in front of them. Barbara's face dropped. Carl's jaw tightened. Michael's eyes widened. Because my name was the only one on it. Michael had been lazy about the stuff, so I handled everything. The mortgage, the inspections, the insurance, all of it. And I made sure that the house was in my name only. Michael had no idea. This isn't right," Barbara stammered, her voice rising. Carl snatched the papers off the counter like he could change what was written. His eyes darted over the legal language, his face turning red. Michael was still frozen, blinking like his brain was trying to catch up. I didn't wait for them to start arguing. I pulled out 2 more papers and placed them on top of the deed. "If you want to live here," I said, calm as ever, "you'll need to sign these tenant agreements. And pay rent." Silence. The look on their faces? Priceless. Barbara's eyes snapped to Michael, waiting for him to do something. Michael turned to me, his voice barely above a whisper. "What is this?" "This," I said, tapping the contract, "is me making sure I don't get trapped in a nightmare." Barbara let out a high-pitched laugh. "Oh, honey, you can't be serious." "I am." Carl's nostrils flared. "We're your family. And I'm your daughter-in-law, not your retirement plan." I shot back. Barbara's face twisted. "You can't expect us to pay rent like strangers." "Why not?" I said. "You were paying rent before." "What changed?" Barbara sputtered. "We thought, that's the problem," I cut in. "You thought you could just show up and move in. Without asking. Without discussing. Like this is your house." Carl slammed the contract down. "This is disrespectful." I crossed my arms. "What's disrespectful is assuming you can barge into my home and demand a free ride." Michael finally found his voice. "This is insane," he muttered. "Why didn't you tell me you put the house in your name?" I turned to him, slowly. "Would it have changed anything?" He opened his mouth. Closed it. I tilted my head. Would you have stopped your parents from pulling this stunt? Silence. Yeah, that's what I thought. Barbara jumped in, voice dripping with fake concern. Michael, sweetie, she's turning you against your own family. Can't you see that? I raised an eyebrow. Turning him against you? Or stopping you from using him? Carl pointed a shaky finger at me. We aren't going anywhere. I smiled. Yes, you are. And then, I pulled out my final weapon. Their eyes locked onto the papers in my hands. Barbara's face paled. Carl froze. Michael tensed. This is a formal eviction notice, I said. If you refuse to sign the tenant contract and pay rent, you have 30 days to leave. That's the law. Barbara let out a gasp like I had physically struck her. Carl's hands clenched into fists. You wouldn't dare. I held his stare. Try me. Michael looked at me like he didn't recognize me. You're really doing this? I turned to him, my voice even. They put you in a position where you had to choose, Michael. And you chose them. His mouth opened. Closed. Barbara's voice was shrill. You're heartless. No, I said, grabbing my coffee and taking a sip. I'm just not a doormat. And then? Silence. Complete. Deafening. Silence. For the first time, Barbara and Carl looked truly lost. They weren't used to people standing up to them. They weren't used to losing. And they definitely weren't used to being told no. But I wasn't backing down. Not now. Not ever. Barbara and Carl were stunned into silence. For a few seconds, it was like their brains just couldn't process what was happening. They had shown up expecting a warm welcome, a cozy place to settle into, and full control over my house and my life. Instead, they were staring at a legal eviction notice. Then Barbara did what she always did when things didn't go her way. She burst into tears. Oh, Michael. She sobbed, clutching her chest like she'd been stabbed. She's kicking us out. After everything we've done for you. After we raised you. After we sacrificed for you. How could you let her do this to your own parents? Michael looked torn. His shoulders tensed, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Mom! It's not like that. Carl wasn't crying. Carl was glaring. You'll regret this, he said, his voice low and dangerous. I smiled. Doubt it. Then I turned and walked out of the room, leaving Michael to deal with them. But that wasn't the end. Oh no. That was just the beginning. Michael spent the next week begging me to change my mind. They don't have anywhere else to go, he pleaded. They live just fine before showing up here, I pointed out. They still have money. They just don't want to spend it. He looked frustrated. So what? You're just going to make them leave? Yes. His jaw tightened. I can't believe you're doing this. I crossed my arms. And I can't believe you're okay with your parents moving into our house without asking. Their family, he shot back, as if that meant anything at this point. I had zero patience left. They are not our children. We are not responsible for them. He didn't have a response to that, because he knew I was right. But instead of growing a backbone, instead of standing by me, Michael did the worst possible thing he could do. He teamed up with them. Barbara and Carl refused to leave. At first, they just made themselves as annoying as possible, hogging the living room, taking over the kitchen, acting like they were the rightful owners of the house. But when I didn't react, they escalated. I started noticing little things. My car keys missing from the counter, only to be found in the laundry hamper. The Wi-Fi mysteriously going down, only for Carl to fix it right after I called the company and confirmed someone had unplugged the router. My favorite coffee mug shattered on the floor one morning. Barbara gasped. Oh, dear, my hand must have slipped. It was all petty, childish stuff. But the worst part? Michael knew. And he did nothing. "They're just adjusting," he said one night when I confronted him. "You're overreacting." I stared at him. This was the man I married? This was who he had always been? I felt something snap inside me. I wasn't just fighting Barbara and Carl anymore. I was fighting my own husband. 2 weeks before their eviction deadline, I came home from work and felt it immediately. Something was wrong. The house smelled different, like old furniture and dusty fabric. I walked into the guest room. And froze. Their entire bedroom set was in there. Their nightstands, their dresser, their ugly floral bedspread. I stormed out. "What is this?" Barbara beamed like I had just complimented her on her cooking. "Oh, sweetie," she said, completely unfazed. "We just had a few things sent over." Carl walked in, holding a beer like he owned the place. "Thought we'd get settled in early." My vision blurred with rage. I turned to Michael. His face was pale. He knew I was about to lose it. "They're not leaving," I whispered. "Are they?" Michael hesitated. And that told me everything I needed to know. "You let them move their stuff in?" I asked, my voice shaking. "After everything? After I told you they were leaving?" He swallowed. I thought maybe we could make it work. I took a slow, deep breath. And then I asked the one question I never thought I'd have to ask. "Michael," I said, my voice cold. "Did you give them a copy of our house key?" Barbara smiled. Carl took a long sip of his beer. Michael looked guilty. My stomach dropped. They weren't just refusing to leave. They were planning to stay forever. I walked into our bedroom, locked the door, and breathed through my rage. Okay, fine. If they wanted war, they were going to get war. I spent the next 3 hours on my laptop, making calls, gathering information, making sure I had everything I needed. Then I called a locksmith. And changed every damn lock in the house. I barely slept that night. The locks were changed. The keys were in my possession. But I knew this wasn't over. Michael was silent, barely looking at me. He knew what he had done. He just didn't have the spine to face it. Barbara and Carl, on the other hand? They were furious. The next morning, I woke up to banging on the front door. I walked down the stairs at my own pace, sipping my coffee. Through the peephole, I saw Barbara and Carl standing on the porch, red-faced and seething. I opened the door just a crack. "What's the problem?" I asked, voice calm. Carl shoved his hand forward. I shook my head. "You made your choice. And now I'm making mine." I grabbed my phone and called the police. 15 minutes later, 2 officers arrived. Barbara and Carl were still outside, fuming. I met the officers in the driveway and handed them the eviction notice. "These 2 were legally notified to leave weeks ago," I explained. They refused. They also had unauthorized access to my house. I changed the locks, but now they're causing a disturbance. Barbara's jaw dropped. "You called the police on us?" Carl laughed bitterly. "This is a family matter." The officer shook his head. "No, sir, this is a legal matter." Michael finally came outside. "This is insane," he muttered. The officers weren't interested in his opinion. They turned to Carl and Barbara. "You have 2 choices. Leave peacefully or we remove you." Barbara started wailing. Carl's fists were clenched, his breathing heavy. But he wasn't stupid enough to get himself arrested. So he grabbed his bags and started marching toward the car. Barbara didn't move. She turned to Michael, eyes desperate. "Sweetie," she pleaded. "You can't just let her do this to us." Michael looked at her. Then at me. Then back at her. And he froze. Barbara's face crumbled. She saw what I saw. Michael was too weak to choose. So she made the decision for him. "You're a disgrace." She spat at him. Then she climbed into the car, slamming the door shut. And they drove away. The second they were gone, Michael turned to me, furious. "You went too far." I laughed, actually laughed. "Too far." I echoed. "Michael, they tried to steal our house." He threw up his hands. "They just needed a place to stay." "They wanted a free place to stay," I corrected. "And you were ready to hand it to them." Michael shook his head, looking at me like I was the villain. And that's when I knew. We were never coming back from this. Michael didn't move out right away. He sulked. He tried to guilt me. He told me I was cold, heartless, cruel. I told him I was done. A month later, I served him divorce papers. He didn't fight me. Because deep down, he knew this was his fault. And because he wasn't on the house deed, I kept the house. Michael moved in with his parents. I wish I could say I was surprised. I wasn't. Barbara tried to contact me a few times. I ignored her. Carl? I think he pretended I never existed. As for me? I thrived. I turned the house into my dream home. I traveled. I lived. And I never let anyone take advantage of me again. Looking back, I see now that Michael was never my partner. He was their puppet. I don't regret leaving. Not for a second. And if I ever get married again, I'll make damn sure his name never touches the deed.